Very good afternoon to everybody. Just a couple more people just coming in. I think we're 40, just over 40 who signed up today. But I've had a couple of people sending their apologies just at the last minute. So we may be a fairly select group today, which is great. It's really good to have you with me for my very last workshop 2024. So up to now, we've looked at various themes. We've done something on law firm profitability, on acquiring and retaining clients, and tips for time poor lawyers. But today, what I'm going to be looking at is the issue of partner development and the overlap between growing your practice and developing as a partner on an individual basis. So let's start off with a kind of rhetorical question, which is, what is it about the legal profession which makes the assumption that if you're great at certain things, you're going to be able to translate them into being brilliant at a number of other things? Are you going to be a great business developer just because you've been a great fee earner, et cetera, et cetera? It's interesting that a survey was done by Law Care. This is for the England and Wales Law Society, but I'm sure it's a very similar picture in other jurisdictions, which indicates that 52% of law firms provide no training in leadership, supervision, or management to their partners ever. And I emphasize that very last word. It seems extraordinary. Maybe there is the odd course here and there, but no systematic partner development goes on in most firms. It tends to be more in the bigger firms, of course. In other words, the profession is saying in its majority, you are on your own, guys. A recent LexisNexis survey also found that just 1 in 4 associates aspire to be partners in terms of the aim of their career. And I'm sure that wasn't the case when I started out in my area of work. And I recently did a poll myself on contractor-based law firms, the fee-sharing sector, which is by far the fastest growing. And that indicated that the main reason for that was the work-life balance issue. And I think there's a lot that law firms in their leadership, especially in their small and medium area, that they need to be doing some serious thinking about how they're going to both retain people and then develop them to partner level. So a bit about my background. I was an employment lawyer for 25 years in small and medium-sized firms. I seem to have been bitten by an entrepreneur somewhere along the line because I decided to leave the comfort zone of the larger firm to set my own firm up in 2004, which together with my co-founder, we grew it to about 50 strong. Of course, did everything while I was there. That was the name of the game, multiple responsibilities, 12 balls in the air all the time, lots of fee earning, but also lots of management and business development. How did I do it? Probably if there was a 12-step program that I ought to have been joining to deal with my issues, it would have been the Adrenaline Anonymous, which described how I managed to get through it. Later on, however, I found that both myself and my co-founder, we got much better at getting external help and support from specialists. I really benefited from coaching because it was a personalized way of developing as a partner. So I avoided burning out and discovered a much easier way of managing the practice. Later on in 2022, I'd stepped back from that practice to help other law firm partners through coaching myself. So I do plenty of coaching on an individual basis, but also with groups of people going into firms, helping them with different aspects of the running of the compliance and so on. So that's me. So it'd be very interesting to hear from your own experience, what sort of partnership provision there is in the firms, either that you're in now or firms you've worked for previously. Just a moment for people to put their results in. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to just end the poll now and show the result. Well, we're getting 75% is the no. I expected it slightly exceeding the 52%, which seems to be the nationwide figure for partner development. But clearly there is a deficit on that in the profession. So this is a typical story of somebody who is a high flyer in a law firm. Kim, and of course, when I talk about particular individuals, I'm disguising their identity, but they're all based on actual experience. An intellectual property lawyer, doing really well, 8 years of PQE. She was her top fee earner. She was capable. She was organized, very popular with clients. Why not make her a partner? Thought the leadership team within the firm. Now she's a top biller. You wouldn't expect anything else from her, but she has to manage a team, not all of whom are performing to the maximum. She has to get new work in, including new clients, be more responsible for the business development strategy. There is a line manager who could give her support, but he's not really there very much in the office. She also has to think about the visibility that she has with seniors. She's got that capital P, partner, on her business card and on her email signature. But the reality of her experience is that she's no longer even the technical whiz that she used to be, because she doesn't really get the time to go on all those webinars and to read up on the latest cases and that kind of thing. She's basically time poor. She's working weekends. She spends less time with her partner. Now, the response that she has, and very common, I think many lawyers would have the same responses, to say comes with the territory. It's always been done that way. And she does work weekends, but she's a high flyer and she's on the verge of burnout. So that's a sort of typical experience. Just moving on to, we're going to be looking at generally. So I'm going to just touch on this issue of support or lack of it in the profession and what the implications of that are. Then we're going to look at the strategy for developing, for growing as a partner and with your firm, with the overwhelm that's often associated with it in outline. And we'll focus then in on partner growth tips and practice growth tips. We'll move on to the benefits of coaching on a personalized basis, and we'll look at bringing it together to a sustained success. So that's what we're going to cover today. There is support in many firms. Training is the obvious types of support that there is. Of course, it's few and far between, and we heard from the stats at the beginning about how few law firms actually provide this. And of course, in the hybrid era, it's more hit and miss than ever before. It's only the biggest firms that tend to have a cohort of partners who get promotion at the same time. So it's thing. Yes, I'm fully in favor of it, and I help myself in some partner development programs, but there are limitations, obviously. This one is an illustration of the more typical, the traditional method of support, which is, first of all, the thing you might notice is that the office is pretty empty at the moment, which of course makes this type of support even less effective than it used to be, which is the osmosis approach. And again, I don't knock it. And I learned so much from partners by the process of osmosis, but it is by its nature not consistent. If you think about the situation where, say you have a senior associate who is being supervised by a head of department that have a meeting maybe once a month or even once a week if they're really lucky, how structured in reality are those kind of encounters, and how many senior associates will want to answer the how is it going question of that senior partner? How's it going? Oh, I'm really struggling. Not very many people are going to do that unless you have developed a supervision system, which is a bit more sophisticated and out with a proper agenda, etc. The coaching approach to support, the great thing about it is that it is very much personalized, it's confidential. So it's a space where people can have that non-judgmental encounter. And this thing about being reluctant to get help, which is very common, I find, among lawyers. So that's where it has great advantages. I think I've got a good basis for plugging coaching as an approach sometimes, something certainly to consider as part of the mix of partner development as well. Because it's personalized, it can focus on the strengths that you and weaknesses that the individual has. Now, I just wanted to do a little review of some of the ideas about lawyers, what they should be and how these are evolving at the moment. And I think the message that comes in when you look at this, it seems that with lawyers, more and more is expected of them all the time, because they're expected to not only have the legal knowledge, but the business knowledge and so on. Looking at the simple model, the one on the left, the I-shaped lawyer model, the traditional one. And what you can see with there, your legal knowledge and your traditional skills like running the file and the basics of doing the job as a fee owner take up 80%. And then you've got these little slithers of soft skills and business skills. And in the 2010s, there were various academics, lawyers who started thinking about what we really need of people. It evolved to this Delta one where legal knowledge was down to only a third of what was important, but the personal effectiveness and business operations became a much bigger factor, and it became more and more sophisticated. But the interesting thing about the O-shaped model, and you may have seen it around LinkedIn and in various places, the O-shaped model, a guy called Dan Kane. And it's interesting the origin of this, because Dan Kane himself was head of chief counsel in Network Rail in the UK. And it reflects his experience outsourcing work to private firms and the problems that he had as a business person. He was very much concerned about the interaction between the business and law and the difficulties he had with working with people in private practice. And so he started to think about what is it he wanted in a lawyer. Of course, the technical bit is assumed anyway. And the technical bit was just the backdrop to your interaction as a business person. And so he came up with this idea that you've got to look at the characteristics of the person. So optimistic, the 5 O's is what he called it. Are they optimistic? Are they original? Are they opportunistic? Do they take ownership of what they've done? Are they open? And then attributes like trust and influence, communication skills, collaboration, problem solving, being able to identify opportunities, being able to synthesize information, simplifying complexity. Of course, that which is one of the hardest things to learn when you come out of law school, to put over things in less than a 5-page essay when you're delivering advice to clients. Courage, resilience, being able to take feedback and continuous learning. And then I'm not going to go into the Adam Curfey model. Adam Curfey is an academic and lawyer who's done some research on the increasing complexity of the lawyer role. The sort of message from all of this, and we're talking about lawyers here, we're not even talking about partners, are almost expected to be super lawyers, be brilliant at tech, be brilliant at business development and so on. And that's the world we are in terms of the competitive market. And so therefore we need to be thinking about how we support lawyers become great business people. And if we start supporting them right from the early stages within the firms, of course, then they're going to be much stronger candidates for partnership. And also it's going to be less of a shock to them, and they're probably going to be less likely to take the alternative route of going into the fee sharing based law firms. So the old chestnuts then in the legal profession are you hit the ground running, if you like, or you're a caterpillar who metamorphoses automatically into being a partner. Or the law firm is a different type of business. It's a profession. It's not a normal business. Therefore, it has its own set of rules about developing its business people. Or if you're great at client relationships, you're inevitably going to be great as a business development strategist, or this one that is you a great leader, you're naturally going to become a great leader of people. So that those are your typical expectations. But I would say a much more structured approach to developing partners is the key. And so I look at 4 key elements of it. First of all, developing your vision and then turning that into a plan for your success, a profitable business, whether you're individual partner developing your area of the business, or if you're the leader of the whole law firm, profitable growth strategy. And so that's a really important thing to work on. Of course, it's a people business. So key parts of what you need to develop are the management aspects and the leadership, and getting the best from the client relationships as well. But a lot of it also is personal. So the skills element is key, but you've got to have the mindset, you've got to have the resilience that you need to be able to be successful in all these other areas.
And so we look at that and looking at the leadership roadmap then to pull it all together. So I think the key thing is that wherever you are in the journey, whether you are recently promoted to partner role, or if you've been leading your firm for several years, taking a step back and taking stock to develop a strategic approach in business development, financial as well. And I'll have to say that the financial leadership and management is absolutely crucial to focus on them probably before anything else, because if you're going to build a successful practice, you need to be building on sound financial foundations and practices when it comes to target setting, delivery, and so on. But you've also got to be involving your team in that process. A plan you need also for the growth of your team over time, and also, especially for those who are in large firms and who are looking for a path to the senior leadership, think of yourself having a personal brand which needs to be developed. How you are seen within the practice is also a vital skill to be developing. How you are communicating the commercial success of your area of the business and showing yourself to be future leadership material, if you like. So I put business development at the top, but I'm going to talk briefly about financial management, how your business development translates into billing, recovery, and costs estimates, because of the importance of looking at that and refining it, asking the question, how profitably are you working within your group of people? Are you delegating to the right level? Do you have good practices in terms of money on accounts? Do you have any fee earners who are bad? I think one of the key indicators of whether a fee earner is successful or not is whether their debt levels are above average, because if they're not on top of actually getting the money in, then you've got a problem with that fee earner. Are the problems with lockup within the firm, that people are billing too slowly and collecting too slowly? And very often lawyers look at misleading figures like the profit figures, including even things like work in progress, when if you look at those without having a good handle on how quickly that profit is turned into cash, or how that work in progress, that WIP, is turned into actual billing, then it can give a really misleading impression. So get those financials sorted out first. On the business development, you need a vision for the firm and even your part of the firm. A lot of it involves having a very close focus on the service levels that everybody throughout your firm or within your area of responsibility are delivering. Can you answer this question? The people in your firm offer a truly great service every lawyer every time. Can you truthfully answer that question with it in the affirmative? And then you're going to need to be asking yourself, in what way are you special? Now, part of the answer to that question is, if you can answer the question I've just asked about a truly great lawyer service, every lawyer, every time, then I think you're getting somewhere to how you are special. But of course, you will also need to be looking at the particular niche, because if you say you are in the area of family, which parts of your work are the best parts of your work in terms of profitability? Or are there particular strengths that you have that you're not emphasizing in terms of how concentrating on its development and how you talk to clients or potential clients about what you're great at? If you're in family law again, maybe you've got a real strength in working for senior women who have city jobs. Maybe that's an area that you've had some great results for clients. Can you be using that more and focusing much more on those than, say, the difficult ones who don't pay their bills and this and that? Now, there was a really good BBC business program where they had this situation where a reporter was walking down a quay in Florida. There were rows and rows of people selling lobsters, and he noticed that the product was identical. And there was one particular stall which was selling out. So he went up to that person and said, "What is it? What's your secret? Why are you doing so much better than everyone else?" The guy pointed to a sign above him, which had a picture of a lemon. And next to it, it said 3 lemons with every lobster. And underneath that, a nice simple recipe for baked lobster with lemon. And he turned to the camera at the end and he said, "Where are your lemons?" And that is exactly the question we should be asking ourselves when we're thinking about our niche and finding the best thing about this that we can then develop. Going on from there is the question of the right clients, and past that process will be identifying the right clients. Also having the strength of mind to be able to turn clients away if they're the wrong type of clients, and having reliance on the sort of cash cow type of work, which isn't nearly as profitable, may be something you want to be evolving away from. With business development, real key in most law firms is to mine the gold that you've already got in your practice. Are you from matter 0 to matter 10? How much repeat business are you getting from existing clients? Or if you don't have clients who carry on, who do retainer work and stuff with you or have repeat business, but even if it's individuals, how are you making sure that they speak to people outside? How are you going back to them maybe when you develop a new specialism in your practice? For example, with us, when we opened up the private client department on the back of our family and employment, we had the whole database of people to go back to and try and get some more instructions from them for our wills work. Now, an example of this, again, from my experience, is when GDPR came in. You probably remember everyone was panicking about the fact that the fines were going to go up to potentially 20 million euros. Really good marketing material for us as lawyers to be able to go out and say that to clients. But we knew that if we went to our employment law clients and said, "Are all your employment policies up to scratch in terms of the new 90% of them, they were going to say, "No, it's not." And so we put together a package of GDPR compliant documents. They also had to be bespoke. So it was a great source of extra work on the back, which we created that the clients perhaps didn't know they had that need or hadn't taken the plunge in terms of finding out what they needed to do. So getting that gold from existing clients is hugely important. Referral sources are vital as well. Developing yourself and your fee earners in the long term in terms of your referral sources is absolutely vital. In my case, I hadn't really worked with people in investment banking with my coaching, but because I knew somebody through a networking group that I attended who wasn't investment banker, I got a referral to one of the leading banks for a senior counsel there, because the know and trust, the kind of heavy lifting had already been done for me. And then the other vital component with the business development side is engaging your team, because you as partner, it's so important not to be dragged down into the weeds of doing the administrative side of the business development and making sure that you are being strategic in terms of how you're growing the practice. And then you're getting the help of your fee earners, and that benefiting both you, because there you've got a team of people who are out networking as well as fee earning, and therefore there's potential for more work to come in. But it's also benefiting them in terms of their development towards being part material. So that's the business development. In terms of the team growth, you need to be identifying the goals for the development of the team and how to engage them with the broader goals. In terms of your personal impact, it doesn't really matter whether your ambition is to develop your image as the firm leader with your clients or in your sector. It's about how you as a junior partner are moving towards the senior leadership team. How do you improve your personal impact? Now, an example, Jane, somebody I worked with, her issue was that she was a very effective fee earner, bringing her own work and gave a lot of value to her firm, but she didn't feel that she was sufficiently appreciated, and she wanted a significant increase in her pay. When we spoke, I discussed with her what the best way to deal with this situation was. And so it was all about getting a strategy worked out between us for showing the value that she had to the senior leadership team. So going along and simply saying, I think I deserve a pay increase because of billing that I'm doing, needed to be accompanied by something much bigger, and needed to be preceded by a campaign, if you like, to show the value that she could, and how helpful she was as a developing partner. So personal impact is absolutely key. Managing key relationships. So the goals and the vision that you set, how do they fit into the firm's broader goals? You need to have that clear, but then you need to think about how you can get your team engaged with that. So engaging them at the planning stage is first tip, I would say, and explaining how to them, getting them to understand how the results fit into the overall direction of your part of the business or for the whole business. And, very often the real weakness here is in communication. Somebody I work with had a smallish and she had acquired the equity from the former owner of the firm, but the owner was still there as a consultant. And he was a very good lawyer and he had a very good set of clients. But the problem was he was really working within a silo. So there was a risk to the firm of losing that work when he finally did decide to hang up his wig, if you like. And with him also would go those client relationships. We had to break down the problem into two elements. One is where the work goes, and the other one is what happens with the client relationships. And we realized that quite feasible to be able to develop the client relationships, even without the person I was working with being able to do the work herself, but she could still develop the relationship with the client. And then for the technical person, we needed to get someone new in, but that will be something that happened over time. But what she hadn't done was speak to the former equity owner, who is now the consultant. And so we put together a plan for having that conversation and what should be in the conversation. Anyway, she had the conversation. It went really well. And the great thing about it was he seemed relieved that somebody was now trying to integrate him into the strategy for a succession plan, essentially, which was only partially being put into place by her acquiring the equity. So it's a good example. Now, managing, delegating, and supervising, so tempting when you're a partner and you can do things pretty well. In some cases, some things you might be able to do standing on your head, not to delegate to the most appropriate level. And somebody I knew in a private client had a certain type of document which he could do at a fixed fee, and he knew he could knock it off pretty quickly. And so he liked doing that work, even though it wasn't that complicated. But what I said to him was, you need to be thinking about training people up who are within your team to be able to do work like that, so that you can delegate things down and essentially be working more efficiently. And the general principle is it should be delegated. Work should be delegated to the lowest level that it can be. And the partners need to be letting go of fear and opportunities. Very rightly, because of the way they've been brought through the system, are often neurotic about letting go of work because they're thinking about their own billing targets rather than the whole team's billing targets. But that is a mistake which law firms still fall into. And I think it's important to evolve away from. The supervision arrangements I'm also mentioning because you need to be ensuring that there is some structure to that. And the supervision, which consists of a quick chat regularly or less regularly, is everything okay conversation I mentioned earlier with the senior partner. You need to have a structured agenda for such conversations and also training of those in the supervisory roles as well. What kind of culture do you need to develop within the firm? A no blame culture. What Simon Sinek, business writer, would have described as the circle of safety. Now, no blame culture is not only vital for compliance, people being too scared to talk about problems that they've got, which might have compliance implications, but it's also good business and management practice. That's absolutely key thing to be developing. With the hiring and occasional firing, I'm afraid, decisions that you have to make, law firms tend to rely on the very simplistic traditional methods of a straightforward interview. I've got a story from my own experience of this, where we recruited somebody who had a great CV, really good academics and experience in good firms. And we offered the job. Everything was fine. Terms were all okay. And the recruitment process took a couple of months. Got to the Monday morning when she was supposed to turn up, and she just simply didn't turn up. She didn't tell us. She didn't tell the agency. One of the things we noticed when we look back at the CV was she had a tendency in the past to flip from one job to another. And probably if we had looked more deeply into it, the warning signs would have been there. And I think law firms do need to be much more scientific, if you like, about the way they approach recruitment. And thinking back to the O-shaped lawyer thing that I mentioned, and all the characteristics and attributes that you are looking for, because really we want in our law firms, we need people to be A players. And that means not being just technically great lawyers, but having all the other attributes. And so you need to be very much more in depth in the recruitment. So the other thing that's very important that comes up for me in the coaching is how do you grow your team and how do you get the resources, the senior leadership to commit to you being able to recruit someone new, for example. So how do you extract the resources, if you like? Of course, you can't just go to the senior leadership and say, oh, it's going to cost us so much to get somebody else on board and this is what we're going to do. Go with a business plan, go with something which shows that there's going to be a great opportunity for growth in your area of business. Cultivation of key relationships, I find, is a problem for people as they develop as partners. Often is that they get so bogged down in not only the fee earning, but also the management side of things that they basically are so busy. They don't have enough time for the clients. So the client relationships that they had built up over years start to get a bit weak. I had someone recently who perceived that was just what was happening to him. And so what we did was we looked at a strategy for going out and spending more time with the important clients, sharing events and so on with his head of department, because his head of department was one of these people who was great. He was a rainmaker, but he wasn't going to be there forever. And my guy was hoping to step into his shoes, yet he was getting further and further away, relying on the senior partner. So important to make sure that you still cultivate the client relationships. The other thing is, if you're in the more junior partner level, is to make sure that you don't get bogged down in the management of your own small parts of the business and you don't engage sufficiently with the senior leadership of the firm, the direction, and of course, conveying that to your team so that it comes to the notice of the senior leadership that you are fully on board with the strategy. So that's the relationship part. Key personal skills. We mentioned the attributes, we mentioned the characteristics, but these are the things that they don't teach you at law school, or it seems in terms of development people as an associate. What have you got to do now as a partner? Leadership, managing a team. You've been working maybe at your optimal level, but going from there to getting the best out of your team it's a big jump. And leadership of a team is about them supporting you with their abilities, but also you have to be concerned about what their aspirations are, because are you giving them a framework for their own career development? Because if you aren't, you're at great risk of losing people. And the more confident and capable they get, the more at risk you are of losing those people from the team. So what are their aspirations? How can you communicate to them how their aspirations fit into the development of the firm? People management involves your leadership, but also the more micro level of managing performance. It doesn't come comfortably to many of us when we get into a management position as a partner to have to deal with the underperforming employee, for example, or even in some cases, terminating their employment after due process, etc. The business development, you need a strategy that works rather than just being a great networker yourself. So being more strategic about everything you do. And then the last point, self-management. All the new skills that you're developing as a partner require you to be much more resilient from a mental point of view. You're a fear and a leader. And it's a lot different now because if you've got a trial next week, if you're in the associate position, typically it's open to you to clear your desk completely and concentrate on that task at hand. But you can't cancel all your management meetings, the meetings with senior leadership and so on when you're in the partner position. So you need to be much better at keeping you focused and so on. And a lot of it is also mental attributes. So not just skills, resilience. You're under pressure from all directions, and you need to be adapting, responding to issues which are many and intertwined. You need more confidence. Now, Laurence Olivier and Barbara Streisand, what did they have in common? Until the end of their career, they actually suffered from stage fright. So you can be the most confident person in certain situations, but when it comes to something which is out of your comfort zone, an example might be the first time you have to discipline one of the members of your team. It's always been done by people higher up before, or maybe it's on the business development side, developing your confidence, emotional intelligence. How good are you at spotting the signals of a team member who's at risk of burnout with huge consequences for the whole of your team? A self-care mindset, looking out for yourself in the long term. You're in it for the long haul. Now, previously, both of myself and my fellow owner of the firm noticed that we were expanding slightly around the waist area because we were completely neglecting our going to the gym and all that kind of thing. So we came up with a little strategy, which was that we joined one right by the office so that at least we could get in there 2 or 3 times a week on the way home. That's the kind of mentality you need to have in terms of self-care, getting your sleep, mindfulness, meditation, all of those kind of techniques, if you like, which people may talk about scathingly and isn't really the kind of thing that lawyers often talk about. It's damned important. Managing your mind. What do I mean by this? When you're under pressure, there can be a tendency to react in a sort of fight or flight response, but you can develop techniques for handling this situation, mental techniques for being able to deal with sudden crisis situations. The natural thing as humans is for us to go back to our evolutionary state on the Serengeti plain, if you like. If you think you're being attacked by wild beasts or whatever, and so to retreat into your cave. But with my management techniques, you can manage that sort of situation much better. And I'm going to illustrate that with the next slide, is to the tale of 2 partners, because both of these partners here had identical items on their agenda at the start of the day. This is a Monday morning, and they both devoted their diaries for the morning to working on a hefty client document, which was been around for a while, but it was beginning to get into the sort of urgent part. So it was really important to do that. But 2 things arose on the Monday morning. First of all, there was one of the best clients called in just after 9 with a request for some really urgent work to be sorted out. And then there was also one of the associates that reported to the partner who needed some help with a particular knotty problem that had come up on a file. And both of them, by the way, had promised to be leaving at 5 o'clock because it was their turns to the bathing of the kids that day. So they promised their partner that 5 o'clock exit was there. So why is the one on the left's dilemma much worse than the one on the right? The lady on the left, she arrived already feeling the pressure. Oh my goodness, it's a Monday morning. She came in, she saw her to-do list staring at her accusingly. And then she was just about to get down to this heavy document. And when the phone went with this new client inquiry, she went into that kind of fight or flight response. So it kind of froze her, caused her to be distracted for quite a while. And she eventually got to doing the work. But then the next thing was that the associate came in with the problem. She saw that associate straight away. That, if anything, was a bit of a relief, him coming in to take her attention away from the urgent client matter. Anyway, long and short, 5 o'clock came, phone call back to the partner, apologetic and all that kind of thing. She was going to be carrying on working for quite a while to get everything done and was in a pretty stressed state by the end of the day. The one on the right actually had all the same things, but she had already on the Friday before, she'd done a review of her week, of the things that were outstanding, to the sort of the bare bones of her planning for the week had already been started on the Friday. Then on the Monday morning, she had devoted time to planning for the week. And in putting in the items that she was going to deal with, she'd allowed contingency time for it, so that when the urgent inquiry came in, she was able to put the existing work into another slot that she got available during that week. The associate didn't come in and interrupt her because they had an agreement that there were certain times of the day that she could speak to people with problems like that. She pretty well cracked the urgent problem by the time the associate bedtime came, and everything was fine. When she got to 5 o'clock, she did a sort of rejigging of her timetable for the week and she went home. Now, part of the difference in the response of this particular individual to that of the first person, she had a system of organization. The point about the system of organization was not about being organized for its own sake, but it's about restoring a sense of mental control. So that's why I emphasize this point about developing the mental side. And so what you're doing is you're developing your personal strengths. And this slide summarizes all those aspects that you're working on. Because if you don't do that, it's the traditional way that you get your head down and you get on with it. And you expect your team to get on with it. You think, I'm a confident advisor, so I must be a confident leader and manager of a team. And I can overcome my stress by adrenaline, and I can always catch up on Saturday if I need to. So that's a traditional way. An alternative approach is the having support, getting help of different kinds. Coaching is just one way. And if you're interested, my offer here is for a free 45-minute growth strategy session. So it's a coaching session entirely free. And if you'd like to book one in at this point, that would be absolutely great. It's very much a session for yourself. It's a coaching session where I will help you with 2 or 3 really useful ideas for developing your practice. And you at the end of it, if you want to hear about my program, you can, but it's absolutely, if you're interested, to hear about my extended coaching program at the end. The last stage of the process that I've described to you, which is putting it together, having looked at your vision and your strategies for how to implement the goals that you've worked out, developing the people relationship side, developing the personal skills and also the mindset. And then at the end of the time that I would work with you as a coach, we put it together into a leadership roadmap, because I would typically work with people for 12 weeks initially, and then we work out the roadmap for the next 3 years, 1 year and 3 months, working backwards from where you want to get to. Don't go down the traditional work, which risks burnout and continuing to muddle through. Take a structured approach. Get a grip with your partnership development is my message today. And it's not a case of necessarily working with me, approach you can take yourself. And then just finally, I wanted to mention what my special offer is. If as a result of today's event, you did sign up to my full programs, there will be a Fortnum & Mason's hamper winging its way towards you. And hopefully that will be before Christmas, but I know you may want to book into the calendar into the new year, of course. It's also possible. Thank you very much. Wish you all a very happy Christmas.